Welcome to The Real News. I'm Eddie Conway, coming to you from Baltimore in our Studio 4. I'm here with a delegate candidate for the state delegation in Annapolis, Andy Ellis, and I want to find out what his program is and what he intends to do. Okay, Andy, tell me a little bit about your party and tell me what you're doing.
So my name's Andy Ellis, and I'm running for 45th District State Delegate as a Green Party candidate. The Green Party is committed to building political independence, committed to social, economic, racial, and environmental justice. And in Maryland, we've been expanding over the past couple of years. In 2016, we had 3 chapters in the state. At the beginning of this election cycle, we have 11 chapters in the state, and there's 25 Green Party candidates running across the country for state and local offices this year. That's actually about 1/10 of all the Green Party candidates that are going to be on the general election ballot in November this year. So Maryland is really starting to come to the forefront of Green Party building in the state, and a lot of that emanated here out of Baltimore.
Well, have there ever been a Green Party candidate to win election in any office in the state of Maryland?
So Green Party candidates have won nonpartisan elections at several points, sitting on some town councils and some mayorships in different places, but they're nonpartisan races. So we haven't yet won a race where we show up on the ballot as a Green, but we do believe that once we make that breakthrough, we open up the doors in places like Baltimore, Prince George's County, and Montgomery County, where the Democrats are the only party in charge, or in Western Maryland or the Eastern Shore, where the Republicans are the only party in charge. And our goal is to sort of be the second party in those places where there is only one party right now, which is most of Maryland.
And well, what does the Green Party bring to the population? I mean, what kind of, I heard you run through a list of things that you're concerned, but what kind of new policies, different policies, other than what Hogan is bringing or other than what Ben Jealous is suggesting? I mean, what does the Green Party bring to the population?
So I think a lot of the things that we see right now coming into the general discussion, like Medicare for All and like universal basic income, are things that the Green Party has been advocating for a long time. Things like moratorium on carbon infrastructure and fossil fuel infrastructure are things that the Green Party has been advocating. So some of the most popular ideas starting to take over in this post-Bernie Sanders era emanate out of Green Party organizing. Now, here in Maryland, what I think we bring is policies that aren't dictated by lobbyists and aren't dictated by special interest dollars. So I think a great example of this in Maryland is fracking. When we banned fracking a couple of years ago, we didn't ban pipelines and we didn't ban export terminals. And we didn't set a timeline to stop those things. So what we end up having is sure, there's no drilling in Maryland per se, but we still have pipelines running through the state to an export terminal in Calvert County. And what the Green Party would say is, because we're not tainted by the special interest money there, is we're also going to ban that carbon infrastructure, right? And I think that's the type of distinction that we're looking at there is we have halfway solutions that emanate from the principal parties, because at the end of the day, their campaigns are still paid for by people who profit and benefit from these things. And the Green Party is not going to take those shortcuts and not take those excuses, because we only get elected by serving people, not by serving profit and power.
And speaking of getting elected, one of the things that you challenge is the mass media. You don't get a lot of media. I don't hear a lot of media attention on Green Party candidates and so on. How are you addressing that down on the ground in order to win the popular vote?
You know, so we are knocking a lot of doors. Since the primary has been over, we've probably knocked about 3,000 doors, and we're knocking every day. And myself and Glenn Ross, who's running along with me in the 45th District, are both out there every day working on that and talking to people where they are in their neighborhoods. And 3 things come up that we think are really influenced by the mass media when we talk to most voters. One is the Green Party doesn't have an idea of how to govern. They just have good ideas, but they don't know how to implement them. That's the first one. The second one is that the Green Party doesn't show up except during presidential elections. And the third is that at the end of the day, the Green Party is really no different than Democrats. They just are an outsider or something, right? And so when we talk to people on doors, we really try to address these three things with solid examples and with explanations of how we're going to do it.
Give me a solid example of each one of them, say, for instance.
Yeah, so on the first one, a lot of the things that we're advocating right now in our state delegate campaign are things like $15 an hour minimum wage, which we know isn't enough, but should have already been done in a place where Democrats have control of both houses. A ban on fracking infrastructure so that we're not filling the state with pipelines and oil trains, right? And we believe that the way that these things get done is by showing Democrats who are complacent on these issues that they can lose if they don't make sure that workers have wages and that our environment is clean. Right now, they believe they can't lose, so they sort of toe the middle line, and we're a state with that should have a very progressive state legislature, but is still run by 20th century and in some cases 19th century Democrats. So when we talk about governance, we're not going in there trying to to bring everything down. We're going in there saying these are things that should have already been done by Democrats in this state, and until they understand that they can lose for not doing them, they're not going to get done. So that's the first example of that. The second example is we're working on building, we're not working on just a 5-week plan, 5-month plan. We're working on a multi-year plan to build stakeholder coalitions throughout East Baltimore and throughout West Baltimore, where the voters will continue to be connected to the issues that are going on in Annapolis. One of the things that we think happens too often is our representatives go to Annapolis, don't really inform that many people. Not that many people are concerned about what happens there, and they deal with the effects of policy, but don't have a say in its formation. So what we're trying to do is to bring advocate groups together with community leaders and community organizations to make sure that there's a continued process of informing people. Some of that means keeping our canvases up, some of that means community meetings, and some of that means using electoral infrastructure like phone call lists and door knock lists to continue talking to people during the non-election season.
Mm-hmm. And to the last point?
To the last point, so I'm not one to go into the communities that we're working in and try to impose solutions, right? So I believe that the first step is to get the stakeholder coalitions up and running throughout the state so that we have residents, community leaders, community organizers working with advocates in Annapolis and working with advocates in Holiday Street so that we can come up with the big asks, but that they come from the grassroots and not from the top down. So, I don't want to go into Oliver and say, what you need is X. I want to have meetings in Oliver where people say, here are what the problems are, and then put them together with people who know how to make solutions to those things, and then take that big ask to Annapolis.
Okay, so tell me now, what's the hurdles that you have to overcome to actually win this particular district, one, and two, if you do win this particular district, how do you insert yourself in Annapolis as a sole candidate, say, for instance, with a Green Party affiliation?
That's a great question. So the first one, to win this, I think that we have to reach a lot of voters. I think that in Baltimore City, most voters have become conditioned to believe that the primary election is the only election that matters. And if we look historically, Democrats who have won the primary have won every election for decades. So we need to overcome that belief that it is impossible for something to change, and we need to overcome that apathy that I think has been manufactured in order to make sure that people don't participate in the system. To do that, it's going to require knocking on a lot of doors because we don't have the mass media approach to reach people. And the more people we reach, the more people I think are persuaded. And as we've done this Green Party work here in Baltimore and across the state, we may not yet be at a place where we're at a tipping point to win, but what we do know is the more people we talk to, the more open they are to the idea and the more accepting they are to the necessity of an alternative. Almost everybody we talk to wants choices, and they want both of the elections that our taxpayer dollars pay for to actually matter. So we need to reach people. We need to get out to enough people. The second thing is, one of the things that I've been very deliberate about is I'm talking to currently elected officials of the Democratic Party, and if it happens, I'll talk to Republicans as well, because I don't want to get to Annapolis, be isolated, and only have the bully pulpit. I want to start building those coalitions and connections right now. So downstairs at Ida B's a couple of weeks ago, I sat down with Senator Will Smith from Montgomery County, who's going to be the Vice Chair of Judiciary. We had a great conversation about bail and how to do bail reform there. I've spoken with other elected officials, and my goal is to be able to go to Annapolis and work on building coalitions with those folks who already want to challenge the leadership, with the advocacy groups and with the progressive people that are there, and to let them know that they have a challenge to the existing leadership to sort of be able to say, if you all continue dragging your feet on things that matter to everyday people, like wages and transit and a clean environment, then there's a risk that you're going to lose. And I think it has the opportunity to galvanize what is a lot of progressives in Annapolis to be able to have some leverage to ask for their positions.
Thank you for joining me, and thank you for joining The Real News.